What? Non, merci. Ouais, ouais. Nouvelle chemise. J'ai déjà renversé du café dessus. All right, good afternoon. In just a few minutes, we will be joined virtually by Ross Smith, who, as you know, is World Food Programme's Director of Emergency Preparedness and Response. He will brief you on the situation in Gaza and the incidents around the WFP convoy that happened over the weekend, and he will be connected from Rome. Tomorrow, we will be joined by the chief economist of the Food and Agricultural Organization, Maximo Torero. He will brief you on the food price inflation and what to expect at the upcoming State of Food Security and Nutrition of the World Report 2025. Also, tomorrow's going to be a busy day. I'm telling you that now. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Here at UN headquarters, the Secretary General will deliver a special address entitled Moment of Opportunity, Supercharging the Clean Energy Age. This is a follow-up to his Moment of Truth speech last year on climate. In his address, Mr. Guterres will highlight that the clean energy future is no longer a promise, it is a fact, and no government, no industry, and no special interests can stop it. Although unstoppable, the energy transition is not yet fast enough or fair enough, and he is expected to tell you. He will also share new data from a specialized technical report prepared by his climate action team with the support of various UN agencies, funds, and programs, as well as leading international institutions. The report, which will be released tomorrow, shows the latest available science and evidence on the progress and opportunities and benefits of the emerging clean energy economy. If you can't join in person, I think you've all received RSVPs on how to connect, and the speech will be broadcast live on UN Web TV. Then at 10 o'clock tomorrow, the Secretary General will deliver remarks at the Security Council's open debate on the maintenance of international peace and security, promoting international peace and security through multilateralism and peaceful settlement of disputes. He's expected to note that around the world we can see the utter disregard for, if not the outright violation of international law, including international human rights law, international refugee law, international humanitarian law, and the UN Charter itself, and all of this without any accountability. The Secretary General is expected to highlight that diplomacy may not have always succeeded in preventing conflicts, violence, and instability, but it still holds the power to stop them. I also expect him to speak to the situation in Gaza in his remarks tomorrow. This morning in the General Assembly Hall, the Secretary General spoke to the high-level political forum. He underscored that this year the forum arrives at a time of profound challenges, but also real possibility, mentioning the pandemic agreement adopted by the World Health Organization, government commitments at the Third UN Ocean Conference, and also the Fourth International Financing for Development Conference, where countries agreed to a new vision for global finance. He noted that these are not isolated wins. The Secretary General also highlighted there are signs of momentum, signs that multilateralism can deliver, and that transformation is not only necessary, it is possible. Those remarks were all shared with you. Turning to the situation in Gaza, and as you heard in his remarks this morning, the Secretary General said that the mass shooting and killings of people seeking United Nations aid for their families in Gaza is an atrocious and inhumane act which he utterly condemns. You will also see that on Sunday, the World Food Programme convoy carrying vital food assistance crossed from Israel into Gaza and encountered large crowds of desperately hungry civilians. You'll hear more about that from our guest, Mr. Ross. As for our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, they tell us that amid ongoing shelling, displacement, and destruction, it continues to receive deeply concerning reports of severely malnourished people who are arriving in medical points and hospitals in extremely poor health. Yesterday, the Ministry of Health reported that more than a dozen people, including children, have reportedly died from hunger in the last 24 hours. our agencies on the ground warn that the conditions in Gaza are nearly impossible there. Civilians must be protected, and the consistent and safe delivery of aid at scale must be facilitated to reach more than 2 million people on the brink of famine. And as you are well aware, over the weekend, Israeli military issued another displacement order in Deir al-Balah, spanning 4 neighborhoods. Our humanitarian affairs colleagues warned that the mass displacement order has dealt yet another devastating blow to the already fragile lifeline keeping people alive across the Gaza Strip. This directive cuts through the Deir al-Balah all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, further fragmenting the Strip and pushing people into overcrowded, unsafe areas with no shelter and no access to the most essential supplies needed to survive. Initial estimates indicate that between 50,000 and 80,000 people were in the area at the time the order was issued, including 30,000 families sheltering in 57 various displacement sites. Several primary health clinics and medical points within the newly designated areas is the southern Gaza desalination plant and other vital water infrastructure. The plant is a main source of drinking water for internally displaced people in Al-Mawasi, and it serves hundreds of thousands of people, producing about 2,500 cubic meters of water per day. The loss of this facility would be catastrophic for the people who depend on it for access to fresh water. As of early July, 80% of water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities fall within the Israeli militarized zone or in areas that have been placed under displacement orders. In June, it was estimated that 93% of households have no access to direct water. UN staff are remaining in Deir al-Balah. They are spread across a dozen premises. Their coordinates, their location, have been shared with all relevant parties to this conflict. These locations, as with all civilian sites, must be protected, regardless of the issuance of the displacement orders. Meanwhile, our humanitarian partners have relocated to the northern part of Deir al-Balah or Al-Mawasi. OCHA reminds us that 87.7% of the Gaza is now under displacement orders or within displacement zones, squeezing about 2.1 million people into a fragmented area of the Strip where hardly any services are available. UN agencies also tell us that 1.35 million people in Gaza need shelter and household items. Harsh weather, humidity, overcrowding, and frequent disassembly and reassembly of tents and tarpaulins lead to a shorter lifespan of shelter items, further exacerbating the dire situation. No shelter supplies have been allowed to enter Gaza for more than 4 months. That's 140 days. Meanwhile, the fuel crisis continues. The limited quantity that have been allowed to enter Gaza in recent days are hardly sufficient. UN agencies and our partners are prioritizing this fuel for the most critical operations. And just to update you on the efforts of our new humanitarian coordinator, for the occupied Palestinian territory, Ramiz Al-Akbarov, who arrived recently. He met with the Prime Minister of the State of Palestine, Dr. Mohammed Mustafa, in Ramallah. At a press conference, Dr. Al-Akbarov called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the unconditional release of the hostages, and the lifting of all restrictions and on access to people in Gaza. To address immediate needs, he said humanitarian organizations must be able to use a traditional system of aid delivery, noting that these are currently undermined by violence, including armed looting and recurrent shooting at civilians seeking aid, which he said must be independently investigated. Turning to Yemen, we have seen the recent escalation between the Houthis and Israel, and I can tell you that the Secretary General is deeply concerned about the renewed airstrikes on Hudaydah port conducted by Israel today. These strikes occurred while the UN mission to support the Hudaydah agreement was patrolling locations in the northern part of the port. The Secretary General is also deeply concerned about the continuing missile and drone strikes conducted by the Houthis against Israel. He urges all involved to cease all attacks immediately. The Secretary General recalls that international law, including international humanitarian law as applicable, must be respected by all parties at all times, including the obligations to respect and protect civilian infrastructure. The Secretary General remains profoundly concerned about the risk of further escalation in the region and reiterates his call once again to all involved to cease all military actions and to exercise maximum restraint. The Secretary General also reiterates the call for the immediate and unconditional release of all UN and other personnel arbitrarily detained by the Houthi authorities. And I have a statement to share with you, which I was just given, but the font is small, so I need my glasses. This is on the situation in Gaza. The Secretary General is appalled by the accelerating breakdown of humanitarian conditions in Gaza, where the last lifelines keeping people alive are collapsing. He deplores the growing reports of children and adults suffering from malnutrition. The Secretary General strongly condemns the ongoing violence, including the shooting, the killing, and the injuring of people attempting to get food for their families. Civilians must be protected, civilians must be respected, and they must never, ever be targeted. The population in Gaza remains gravely undersupplied with the basic necessities of life. Israel has the obligation to allow and facilitate by all means at its disposal the humanitarian relief provided by the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations. The Secretary General notes that the intensification of hostilities in recent days comes as the humanitarian system is being impeded, undermined, and endangered. A new evacuation order in parts of Deir el-Balah, homes for tens of thousands, pushes people into more desperate conditions and further displacement and restricts our ability to deliver life-saving aid. As I mentioned, UN staff is remaining in Deir el-Balah, and 2 UN guest houses have been impacted, despite the parties having been informed of the location of UN premises, which, as you well know, are inviolable. These locations, as with all civilian sites, must be protected regardless of evacuation orders. The Secretary General reiterates his urgent call for the protection of civilians, including humanitarian personnel, and the provision of essential resources to ensure their survival. He once again calls on the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. We stand ready to significantly scale up our humanitarian operations. The time for a ceasefire is now. Moving to southern Lebanon, where our blue helmets at UNIFIL tell us that Israeli Defense Forces military activities in their area of operations. Yesterday, peacekeepers observed heavy machine gun fire from an IDF position across the blue line in Sector East. Our peacekeepers were forced to take shelter, and thankfully no injuries were reported. Over the past few days, peacekeepers also faced incidents of aggressive behaviors by local individuals in Sector West. Once again, it is important to reiterate that the peacekeepers' ability to move freely and safely is a key requirement for mandate implementation. The parties must ensure the safety and security of our peacekeepers. On Friday, UNIFIL members found 2 unauthorized weapon caches in Sector West, including tunnels containing rockets, mortar rounds, and anti-tank missiles, as well as launchers. All of them were referred to the Lebanese Armed Forces for disposal. UNIFIL peacekeepers continue clearing roads debris and rubble from roads due to recent conflict in coordination with the Lebanese army. Peacekeepers also recently cleared several roadways, allowing civilians, Lebanese soldiers, and the peacekeepers themselves to move around more easily, including in Nicosia and in other towns. UNIFIL soldiers have conducted over 280 such operations in South Lebanon since the cessation of hostilities understanding of last November. And on Friday, Lebanese Navy joined a UNIFIL maritime task force ship in patrolling the territorial waters of Lebanon. This kind of joint activity supports the Lebanese Navy in conducting standard maritime operations. Moving next door to Syria, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that more than 93,000 human beings have been displaced due to the escalation of hostilities we saw in Sweda Governorate as of yesterday. That displacement took place both within Sweda and towards neighboring Dara Governorate and rural Damascus. In Sweden, most displaced people are being hosted by local communities and at least 15 reception centers. Some 30 collective shelters have also been opened in Dara. According to reports, a number of hospitals and health centers in Sweden are out of service. Water infrastructure has been critically damaged, disrupting services for over a week. Significant cuts to electricity have also been reported, as well as disruptions to food and other supplies. Our colleagues in the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and working with our humanitarian partners and the interim authorities are working to facilitate a direct visit to Sweden to assess the needs and deliver further assistance when security conditions allow it. Meanwhile, we're engaging with all relevant parties at all levels to facilitate humanitarian access and ensure the protection of people caught up in violence. On Sunday, a first aid convoy deployed by the Syrian Arab Red Crescent reached Sweden city and the district of Salkhad in Sweden itself, where the majority of displaced people sought safety. 32 trucks carried aid provided by our colleagues at the World Food Program and UNICEF, as well as other partners. Teams are delivering vital food, water, medical supplies, and fuel to impacted people. Tom Fletcher, our emergency relief coordinator, welcomed the initial delivery as desperately needed first step, but said much more relief is needed. He said our teams in country and at UN headquarters are mobilized to move as much as we can. We're working with our partners to prepare next convoy of supplies to be sent through the Syrian Arab Red Crescent Society. Meanwhile, in Dara, we and our partners are delivering food, nutrition, water, health, and other critical items to newly displaced people reception centers. We continue to urge all parties to protect people who've been caught up in the violence, including allowing them to move freely to seek safety and medical assistance. You will saw over the weekend we issued a statement in which the Secretary General welcomed the signature of the Declaration of Principles between the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the M23 movement. That signature was done in Doha in Qatar. The Secretary General commends this important step, which opens a pathway towards lasting peace and security and the return of persons and refugees. He urges all parties to ensure the swift implementation of the commitments undertaken and expresses his appreciation to the state of Qatar for its facilitation of this process. We remain committed to supporting efforts towards peace, protection of civilians, stability in the DRC, in close collaboration with national, regional, and international partners. Turning to the situation in Sudan, our humanitarian colleagues warned that the humanitarian crisis in Sudan continues to deepen as cholera is increasingly spreading. Just yesterday, an association of Sudanese doctors in Tawila in North Darfur reported more than 1,300 confirmed cases in just 1 week. That's a dramatic surge and underscores the urgent need to scale up our response. Tawila, as you will recall, is hosting several hundred thousands displaced men, women, and children, the majority of whom fled deadly attacks in the famine-stricken Zamzam camp near Al-Fashir in mid-April. Our partners on the ground have been struggling to keep pace with the growing needs in the area, and the challenges will only increase as the rainy season sets in. Local and international partners have set up cholera treatment centers, but the current capacity is far from sufficient to cope with the rising caseload. Additional resources are needed immediately. This includes more treatment centers, mobile health facilities, ambulances, and waste management tools. Meanwhile, in eastern Sudan, in Kassala state especially, OCHA says that earlier this month more than 1,400 people were displaced because of flooding that followed heavy rains. More than 280 homes were destroyed. A needs assessment mission by OCHA and our partners found that people returned to their villages are forced to rely on open water pools, contaminated waste, and other pollutants, as no other source of water is available. This obviously increases the risk of waterborne diseases. In White Nile State, many residents are returning to their homes. In Umrimta locality, an assessment by OCHA and our partners last week found that health, water, sanitation, hygiene support is urgently needed. We and our partners are working to mobilize supplies before the rain cuts off access. And returns to Khartoum and Blue Nile State are also increasing, with authorities beginning to restore basic services. At Sudan's northern borders, returns from Egypt have surged. IOM tells us that nearly 200,000 people have crossed back into Sudan so far this year. IOM says that since November last year, more than 1.3 million have returned to their areas of origin. However, those who are returning face serious challenges as the threats, especially from the threats of unexploded ordnance. These conditions often lead families to return to displacement sites, undermining the sustainability of these efforts. And last but not least, turning to Europe and Ukraine, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that over the weekend and into today, attacks killed nearly at least 20 civilians and injured more than 100 others, including several children. That's according to authorities. As you know, we condemn any killing of civilians. These strikes impacted the capital, Kyiv, as well as western and frontline regions, damaging homes, schools, and health facilities. In western Ukraine, in the Ivano-Frankivsk region, which hosts many displaced people and had previously been less impacted by hostilities, they suffered the largest attack since the escalation of the war in 2022. And in eastern and southern Ukraine, hostilities in areas near the front lines of Donetsk, Dnipro, and Kherson regions also caused civilian casualties and further damage to schools, health facilities, and apartment buildings. In Odessa, in Kharkiv, and Sumy, other regions are also reported that homes and shops were destroyed, electricity and public utilities were disrupted. Humanitarian organizations with support from our agencies provided shelter materials, non-food items, and other support and assistance for children in Odessa, Pavlograd, Kyiv, and Ivano-Frankivsk. They coordinate with local authorities and first responders. That's it. Edie, then Michelle.
Thank you, Steph. When you said that the Secretary General was concerned or what about 2 guest houses in Deir el-Bala being impacted?
Yeah.
What does impacted
I
mean?
mean, they suffered damage. The UN staff inside was, to say the least, rather rattled, and we're trying to assess the damage.
Okay. And you said that the UN is definitely planning to stay in
That's correct.
Deir el-Bala. Is there any indication of how many Palestinian civilians have fled or are leaving the area?
Well, we have the number right now that have been impacted, which I shared with you. Obviously, we'll have to wait about 24 hours to see how many actually leave.
And in terms of cholera in Sudan, is there any output from what's happening in El Fasher of whether the cholera outbreak has gone there as well?
Our ability to work in El Fasher is severely limited, to say the least. Michelle.
Thank you, Steph. When you say these guest houses were struck, but with what and by whom? And, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one we understand may have been an incendiary device. Others were shrapnel. Unclear whether it was targeted, whether it was just combat. As I said, the investigation is ongoing.
So unclear which party?
It's ongoing, but obviously, I think as you saw, there were heavy reports of Israeli airstrikes in the area.
And then when you speak about the staff that are staying in the area that's under the evacuation order, how many staff are we talking about?
I'm not going to go into exact numbers at this point, but they are both international from a wide variety of countries and national Palestinian staff with their dependents. Gabriel.
Following up on both of those questions, what would be a point where the Secretary General feels that it is no longer safe for UN staff to work in Gaza?
Look, the assessment is made, I'd like to say, not more than daily, right, depending on the conditions on the ground. I mean, the Secretary General obviously is ultimately responsible for the safety of the staff. We also have a responsibility to those Palestinians that we've been desperately trying to help, especially since this war, this phase of the conflict started. I can tell you that our colleagues on the ground are more than dedicated. I mean, I think dedicated is it doesn't really carry the sentiment that they show every day in staying in the front lines, staying in safe houses that are being attacked, trying to deliver aid, as one of our colleagues mentioned, sitting in, I think Carl Scow mentioned, sitting sometimes in cars for 16 to 18 hours waiting for a green light. We can only salute the work that they've been doing, as well as all of our Palestinian colleagues who not only are there as humanitarian workers, but are there as Gazans and who are themselves hungry, who are themselves worried about feeding their families. Deji, then Pam.
Also, a follow-up first on the UN facilities in Deir Bala. As I understand, if I understand correctly, the UN staff is going to stay in Deir Bala no matter there's evacuation order or not. Am I understanding correct?
We are staying, currently staying. And as we've been saying from the beginning, when it comes to the protection of civilians, the protection of humanitarian workers, Israel has a responsibility to protect them, whether they stay or whether they go.
So, which means in Deir Bala, those UN staffers will, or let me put it this way, will be against the evacuation order to stay?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's evacuation order, why they have to stay there? I mean, technically speaking, all the population will leave. So what's
Well, I mean, first of all, Gaza is not a very large place. Deir al-Bala is our hub, is our humanitarian hub, right? From there, staff is dispatched to different parts of Gaza. That's where equipment is. This is where our headquarters are. We will, of course, follow and try to deliver humanitarian aid where the people are, and we've continued to do that.
And another thing is today more than 20 countries put a joint statement to demand ending of the war in Gaza. Any response from the Secretary General?
I don't think the statement was addressed to the Secretary General. The Secretary General has been demanding an end to this conflict for quite some time, as you hear me say every day. He's been asking, demanding a ceasefire. He's been demanding the release of the hostages. He's been demanding the delivery of humanitarian aid at a scale that meets the needs. Pamela Falk.
Thank you, Steph. Late last night, Iran announced that Friday they will be meeting with the E3, France, UK, and Germany on the JCPOA. And the Iranian argument is that there is no legal justification for imposition of the snapback provisions given some of the non-participation in JCPOA. UN is a party to the agreement. What is the UN's view on snapbacks?
No, we are not, the issue of snapback is in a Security Council resolution drafted and adopted by Security Council members. We welcome the dialogue between the Europeans and the Iranians, and let's hope for a return to the JCPOA, a return to dialogue, and a return to the cooperation between Iran and the IAEA.
And so UN itself, I mean, no one affiliated with all of the negotiations.
We are not at those discussions.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Just today, Secretary General met with the Pakistani Foreign Minister today. And, there is a brewing crisis over there after this ceasefire, which is on a hold. Was there any discussion on India-Pakistan situation and how the Secretary General regards Pahalgam as a disputed territory or part of India?
I do not have a readout yet of that meeting. As soon as I have something, I will share it with you. Stefano.
Thank you, Stefan. The United States is the only country that has a leverage on Israeli government at the moment. So does the Secretary General think that the fact that the United States doesn't have at the UN at the moment an ambassador yet, all these months is not been able to really establish a policy with the United States that could help use this leverage in convincing Israel
Stefan,
to
I'm not
to
sure
do
I
something.
understand the question addressed to me.
What I'm just trying to say is that I suspect that the Secretary General, when has to now deal with Israel, that is in the lowest point of the relationship, I believe, between Israel and the United Nations, the only way is going through the United States. Is it correct to say something like that?
I will leave all that analysis to you. We continue to have very regular contacts with the Israeli authorities in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. We continue to push those countries that have an influence on the parties to use that influence to bring an end to the conflict in Gaza.
So when was the last time the Secretary General had a contact with the U.S. government? Who was the highest? With who?
With the U.S. We're talking about
U.S.
Israel.
government, about Gaza, about the situation.
We
in Gaza.
continue to be in touch with the U.S. Authorities. Okay, I don't. Any questions online? I don't. No, I don't see anything. Okay, let's go to our guest. Ross, can you hear us?
I can hear you and see you.
On the World Food Program, who's joining us from Rome. Ross, without further ado, I'll give you the floor, and then we'll take some questions. Go ahead, please.
Sure. Thanks very much, Stephane. And I think you've covered a few different things of quite relevance to what I have to say this morning as well. Just to say that, the hunger crisis in Gaza has certainly reached new and astonishing levels of desperation. And we see information we have is a third of the population are not eating for multiple days in a row. This includes women and children. And as through our assessments that have been released publicly, a quarter of the population are facing famine-like conditions. We see severe acute malnutrition surging, so more than almost 100,000 women and children are suffering from severe acute malnutrition and need treatment as soon as possible. And as you noted, Stephane, at the outset, in some of the reports, people are dying from lack of humanitarian assistance every day, and we are seeing this escalate day by day. Clearly, food assistance, from my perspective, but humanitarian assistance more broadly, is the only solution at the moment. The markets are non-functional and nothing is really moving inside Gaza. For us, there are a set of minimum operating conditions for us to operate. And we need these to be in place in order to move effectively, to work effectively. This includes crossing points into Gaza, includes proper routing inside Gaza itself so we can move independently and at choice. It includes the reduction in waiting times and approval times. And you noted, Stephane, from our Deputy Executive Director, his anecdote of waiting for 16 hours to move from one location to another. And these sort of conditions really create a lot of problems on the ground for both civilians and for our operations. These minimum operating conditions include more than 100 trucks a day that we need to move in order to have sufficient scale to alleviate the desperation that's there. And until we have that scale of assistance, there's going to be really, really difficult to control the situation on the ground. We also need to have no armed actors near food distribution points, near our convoys, and near the movement of those convoys from one place to another. We need to be able to reach people where they are, not in otherwise predetermined locations. And I would say above all, Stephane, that we have had agreements in principle on these things, but we have not had adherence to these in practice in Gaza itself. And this is really where the breakdown is. And it's where we see incidents like you referenced yesterday take place. And so for us, in order to operate, the minimum are these conditions I've just outlined here, but adherence to those conditions by all parties inside Gaza. I can only highlight the critical nature somebody, I think there's someone online.
Yeah.
I can only highlight the critical nature of the ceasefire and the need for a ceasefire at the moment so that we can move effectively. Yesterday's incident is one of the greatest tragedies we've seen for our operations in Gaza and elsewhere while we're trying to work. And it's completely avoidable and it's an absolute tragedy. So, Stephane, I'll just start with those opening points. I'm happy to answer any questions on details. Thank you.
Very much, Ross. Edie?
Thank you very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A couple of follow-up questions from the attack yesterday on the WFP convoy. What is WFP's estimate of how many people were killed and injured? We've seen reports of, I believe, 80 people killed, and which have been questioned by the Israeli authorities. And second, do you have any indication that any of this was organized by either Hamas or gangs? Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ross. Go ahead, Ross.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Edie. So we cannot independently verify, casualties associated with this incident yesterday. When I spoke to the team immediately after the incident, they had information that there was at least 40 people had been killed and there were a larger number of injuries. But then you've seen further reports coming out of other reports since then. So I don't have a final number on that. But indeed, I mean, one is too many, and certainly this is far, far too many. It's an absolute tragic incident. And no, I mean, there is no evidence that it's, as you say, organized by communities on the ground or anything. I think what we are seeing here is the impact of a really desperate crowd that were clearly aware that there was going to be a movement of our food convoy from the crossing in Sikkim, and were anticipating that, and they moved en masse towards a checkpoint. And so the desperation is people are putting their lives on the line clearly in anticipation of being able to get something from a truck. So that's, I think, is what precipitated this incident.
Thank you. Then Gabriel.
Thanks, Ross. Michelle Nichols from Reuters. Sorry, I've got a couple of questions, and you can come back to me if it's too many. You mentioned the agreement for 100 trucks a day. On average, how many have you been getting in? And also there seems to be the issue of how many operational trucks there are within Gaza, given that you have to unload on the Gaza side of the border and then reload onto trucks. So how many sort of operational trucks do you have in Gaza? How many are inoperable that can be fixed and you just need the parts to fix them? Fuel is, I guess, still maybe an issue on that front. And then when it comes to security, what sort of security has the UN used? Does the UN use, if any? If you could just give us a little sort of roundup on that for your aid convoys and warehouses. And then, sorry, last one, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has been pushing the UN to collaborate. Obviously, we all know where the UN stands on that, but have you had any discussions with the GHF, and have they explained to you how such collaboration might work if you were to go down that route? That was my last one.
Go ahead, Ross.
Okay. Thanks. I'll take these. A few questions there. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, in terms of, since the middle of May, we've only been able to move less than 10% of what's needed in terms of number of trucks. So rather than counting trucks, that's kind of what we're looking at as a metric, and so clearly that's not enough. And during the ceasefire earlier this year, we were moving more than 200 trucks just at WFP food assistance alone and that's the level that's needed. I will say that we have enough pre-positioned outside of Gaza to provide assistance for the entire population for 2 months if we can get a ceasefire and if we can move. So We have the capacity outside. We also have, to answer your question on inside, we do have, of course, spare parts and other issues are always there, but we do have the capacity, the logistics capacity, if we have those operating conditions to move. Fuel is an issue, of course, so in order to be able to operate in the context of a ceasefire or a context where all of these minimum operating conditions are met, we need obviously fuel to run the vehicles. We do not use armed escorts for our convoys, and further, we do not have any operational relationship with GHF. And you know, I think I'll revert to all the other briefings you had on this. We of course talk to in every context we talk to many people, but certainly we do not have an operational agreement with GHF.
Benno?
Thanks, Ross. Benno Schwinghammer with the German press agency. You mentioned nearly 100,000 people suffering under acute malnutrition. Can you give us a clearer picture what that means? How long do you estimate would it take for people to starve to death in Gaza on a large scale if nothing changes?
Yeah, thanks, Benno. I mean, severe acute malnutrition, you know, the mortality risks are very, very high, especially for young children. So they need treatment immediately. We are seeing reports, and many of these are, of course, anecdotal reports, but lots of reports of people dying of starvation now. It's very different for an adult versus a child, what it takes to starve to death or to die of acute malnutrition. But we are seeing many of those reports. I don't have more specifics than that, and I can just refer you back to some of those assessments we've done on the percentage of the population in famine, for example.
So you see reports about starvation now, and you deem them credible?
We certainly see reports of, and we hear reports of people that are starving to death, and we certainly have the numbers of people that are suffering from severe acute malnutrition, as well as our monitors and our monitoring information that tell us, as I mentioned at the top, the number of people that are skipping, including women and children, meals, food for multiple days in a row. So certainly we have evidence of the severity of the situation.
Gabriel, then Dulcie.
Thank you, Ross. This is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English. A follow-up question on the incident that took place yesterday. You said that your convoy, as it approached the civilians, came under fire from Israeli forces. My question is, did you guys know that the Israeli forces were there, but there was an agreement that they would allow the safe passage of this aid, or did you not know that they were there and you were surprised by them? When I say you, I mean the WFP convoy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gabriel. Yeah, I mean, I think these are known positions, and so known routes of trucks and known locations of checkpoints. So the issue, Gabriel, is that when our convoy is moving away from the loading platform through the routes inside Gaza, they have to pass through checkpoints. Civilians are anticipating these trucks to arrive, and they crowd the checkpoints. When they crowd the checkpoints, then there are incidents that happen around those checkpoints. So I think that's, you know, I don't have more granular detail than that, but just to say that is what has happened in this case with this checkpoint outside Zikim.
Thank you. Dulcie, then Pam, then.
Hi, thanks very much. It's Dulcie Leinbach from PES Blue. I did want to go back to the notion of collaboration with GHF, because they're holding media briefings every morning now, and they paint quite a different picture from what the UN is saying and how UN defends itself by not working with the GHF. And they say, they even direct their remarks to Cindy McCain saying, you know, give us a call, basically, we want to talk. So my sense is they're getting a little more aggressive about, or at least concerned about these killings and their aid hub operations. And they also say things like, you know, there are 100 UN trucks waiting outside and the food's rotting, and, you know, how can the UN let this happen? So if you could just, I mean, I know the UN says that the GHF is not using international humanitarian law obligations. But what about the possibility at this point working with them in, I mean, because they never say how they would work with you. So that's the big question. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, you know, I probably am repeating points you've heard before, but certainly as, you know, as a humanitarian organization, the work we do and upholding those humanitarian principles are vital for the trust that people put in us. Civilians inside Gaza put trust in us, and of course, people everywhere around the world that we support. So, you know, we talk to many people in the course of our work, but we only have operational relationships with people that uphold those values and principles by which we are able to operate. And so that is our stance. We do not have an operational partnership with GHF. We understand, of course, we know what they are doing inside Gaza. They are working there and they are working in parallel to our operations, and that's fine. But we are not, we do not have an operational relationship with them.
Thanks, Steph, and thank you, Ross. Follow-up, I had a different question planned, but follow-up to this last question. They, clearly the GHF rejected UN aid in the beginning and now is coming back around to working together. What exactly, when you say international law, we all know what that means generally, but what specifically would you want them to do in order to cooperate? In other words, not be armed, not shoot at people come by, what specifically? And then my original question, if I may, was just what's happening when people are injured at the sites? There are not many hospitals operating. Are there medics? Is it Red Cross or anyone there to deal with the wounded? Thank you. Pamela Falk. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Stephane, I'm getting a bit of echo here, but I think I've got the questions fine. So just working backwards on your last question, I mean, I don't have the specifics of the medical facilities available. So of course, people are going to you know, to the facilities that are available for assistance, but I don't have any details on that. And, you know, on just to go back on GHF, I mean, you know, we have the capacity to provide all the support and the scale up necessary in Gaza to meet the food needs of people there. And so that is our position. We certainly have proven that, and during the ceasefire, and of course, prior to that in another context. And so, you know, we are certainly working with many partners in many contexts, and all of them align with our humanitarian principles and our values and our way of working. And so I think that is our standing position on this. And I won't comment specifically on what GHF would need to do. I'll actually refer you to them, and they can probably answer that question a little bit, or at least expand on it. I think our position is quite clear on this. And yeah, thanks, Stephane. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Ross. This is Minglu from China Daily. I'm looking at the Integrated Food Security Phase Identification, IPC, and it seems like the entire Gaza Strip is still currently classified under emergency, which is Phase 4, from May 11 through the end of September 2025. Given the current situation in Gaza, would you expect to update this classification soon?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Indeed, I mean, we have the entire population in Gaza under emergency or higher levels of hunger, and actually 1/4 of the population is under IPC Phase 5, so facing famine-like conditions. And I anticipate that number to grow just given what we are seeing on the ground. So we do update the IPC regularly. both the assessments and the forecast that you're referring to there. So we will have an updated one in the future, yeah.
Thank you. We're going to go online. Magdalena from Bloomberg. Magdalena, go ahead. Magdalena, go ahead. Go ahead.
Wait, can you hear me?
Yes.
They asked my question, so it's all right. Thank you.
All right. Abdelhamid.
Mr. Ross, I hope you hear me. This is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic Daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have a question about the story of Yasser Abu Shabab and his gangs that Israeli managed to recruit, finance, arm, and do their job under the title of Popular Forces. How much you come to encounter these gangs, which is working for the Israelis? How much information you have about them? And my second question, Mr. Ross, that so many Palestinians dying indirectly due to lack of medicine, for example, cancer patients, kidney failures because they cannot do the dialysis, out of famine, many children and others are dying. So what do you think the exact number of the people who died in Gaza directly or indirectly because of the war? And the last question, I know you're still trying to use the Jordan bridge to bring food into Gaza. How much you are successful to keep that path through the Jordan River to get the food into Gaza? Thank you very much for the question, for the patience you have with me.
Okay, thanks. Abdelhamid. Stephane, I answer this one?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I've got a lot of echo on the line, but I got most of the question. Certainly, Abdelhamid, we are aware of the gangs and the context of operating in Gaza. I do not have specifics of that, but just to say that one of our, certainly of these minimum operating conditions I mentioned is that we need to have no armed people, no armed groups in and around near our convoys or our food distribution points, and that's all armed actors that I refer to there. And certainly, the presence of armed and criminal gangs is a big risk factor for us. I don't have details. You mentioned the number of people died. I'll refer you back to some of the other figures that are out there on that. So I don't have anything with me. And just to say on your last question on the crossings into Gaza from the outside, what we're asking for, what we're pushing for, is the ability to use all of those crossings. And I think in the context of a ceasefire, we will need that in order to move sufficiently from all directions into Gaza. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take two more short questions. Stefano, short, and then Michelle, short.
Thank you, Mr. Rossa. This is Stefano Vaccara, La Voce di New York, Ital Press. In the way you communicate with the people in Gaza, I mean, the way your organization is able to communicate it, do you think that you maybe have to change some way, or maybe you're already doing, but can you explain to us how you explain to the people when you're coming, or how you can distribute it, also to prevent that the people, will do what did before, then find themselves in danger and so on?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we actually have a fairly robust communication mechanism to reach out to civilians directly, but also to the community leaders, etc., to pass the message on. We continue to use that. Unfortunately, it is not preventing what we've seen yesterday, and that's because of the desperation of people. They know that the risks are there because, of course, they have seen it firsthand, but they continue to crowd in these locations where there is live fire and where there are armed actors and where there have been previous incidents. And so it just gives you, I think, a real reading on the level of desperation an individual must feel, a decision that they must make to go out in front and potentially be fired upon in order to receive a bag of food.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back to me. On GHF, when it comes to collaborating with the UN, I'm just going to keep it blunt. We're just trying to work out what they would have proposed or what they have proposed to the UN. Does it involve the UN having to pay GHF for security, for aid convoys and aid distribution? Is that what they're proposing to the UN? And then when it comes to getting your 100 trucks in a day, why isn't that happening? What's the simple answer on why that's not happening?
Yeah, thanks. So starting with your last question, I think it is all of the reason we're not able to move at scale there is all of the things I've mentioned on the operating environment inside Gaza itself. So, you know, the time it takes to move from one location to another, the difficulties in getting approvals to move from a loading zone or from a platform into Gaza, the routes being taken, etc. There are many, many factors there that is really, really limiting what we can do. And then, of course, it is our own operational decisions about the risks that we are having to take and the risks that we put civilians and our staff under with some of these situations. So that is the reason we're not able to move at scale, is because these minimum operating conditions are frankly not being met, and even when they are agreed, they're not being adhered to by actors on the ground. On your first question on GHF, I don't have the specifics of what they are asking from the UN. I think there's probably more, you know, in the press of what they're asking of the UN than there is actually specific outreach to the UN, frankly. So, you know, as I said before, we work with many partners in many countries, and we work with partners that uphold the humanitarian principles and allow us to operate in a safe and effective way for the people that we serve.
Ross, I'm going to ask for your indulgence. We're going to squeeze in one last question from Al Jazeera. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Bisan Abuquaik from Al Jazeera Arabic. Just a quick question. What sort of message was sent to the Israelis after yesterday's incident, given that the Israeli forces were the ones who actually fired at the crowds?
Thanks. We have regular contact, of course, and there was a lot of dialogue yesterday and continued dialogue today as follow-up to that incident. So I know there is follow-up happening in terms of investigating what happened, and we're anticipating some response to us. So I don't have more details on that at the moment, but indeed we're waiting for that.
Very, very much for your patience and for doing this on very short notice. We very much appreciate you and all your colleagues on the ground. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.